Hello, I'm grateful to be able to share with you really quickly a story about our high school class that was able to go to Utah Lake, the Provo River Delta Restoration Project, and learn about the freshwater mollusks that were native to the lake, and to also learn about a few of the mollusks that are still found in the lake. I'm a high school science teacher at Wasatch High School in Heber. And during the spring, we started a Friday excursion with students to go out with Paula Trotter from the Bureau of Reclamation. She's the biological technician known as the Frog Lady around our valley. And she took our students out to teach them about the river and about the restoration of the Provo River in Heber Valley. And on one of the days, she invited us to go down to the Provo River Delta restoration next to Utah Lake to be able to meet Kate and Jordan Holcomb, who are the freshwater aquatic biologists for the Division of Wildlife, who specialize in native species. They also are the mollusk experts for the state, and we were down at the lake, and Jordan started to gather mollusk shells that were in the soil. These are subfossils that may be hundreds of years old, and as we were looking at these mollusk shells, he started pointing out species that used to live in Utah Lake and around Utah Lake, and pointed out those that are no longer found there. Out of the what I think is somewhere around 22 species that have been documented in Utah Lake, there are only about 4 or 5 that are actually still found in the lake. And so we had the idea, Paula and I had the idea to uh, take a bucket full of soil from the restoration and have the students go through and start to identify some of the mollusks. We also decided to go right down to the edge of Utah Lake where we could dig up some soil right off the top of the surface where we'd find the mollusks that are currently living in Utah Lake. We have the student, here are what those two sites look like. On the top right is the site from the Provo Delta restoration, and then this site on the left is the site right down near the lake shore. And we had the students sort through the soils and pick out the mollusk shells that they could find, and then clean and categorize um, and put the shells into these collection jars. As we sorted through these, the students started to discover different species, and then using the Utah mollusk identification guide that we got from Jordan at the DWR and the internet, the students started to learn about, and each one was assigned 1 or 2 of these mollusk species to become an expert on. And then they could teach what they had learned to the rest of our class. Then we started to be able to identify. Eventually, we had found 16 species of freshwater mollusks that were found in Utah Lake, and from the restoration soil, and we found 4 species of mollusks that currently live in Utah Lake. The students were able to start to separate and categorize the mollusks, learning about the major features on a mollusk shell, the apertures, the whorls, and being able to compare them in size, shape, and the subtle differences and variations of the shells. As we started to identify the species, Kate and Jordan came to the class. They also corresponded with us through email to help in identifying some of these species and learning about them. The species that are specimens in the top right of this slide are the ones that we found living currently at the edge of Utah Lake. Uh, and in just a moment, I'll share about the one in the very top right. um, Aplexa elongata was a species that had not yet been documented in Utah Lake, and our students were credited with being the first to discover that it was actually there. We did collect some of the data, though this wasn't really replicated or repeated. It does give us the opportunity to see the, at least visually, there's the change from in Utah Lake from having 16 to 20 or more species of freshwater mollusks, and um, and to be in a situation now where there's only 4, and one of these may be new to Utah Lake and may not have been there historically. The students created this type of visual graphic where the species were lined up by their abundance and comparing the two different soils. And we also made this graphic where the species were shown by their percent abundance in a pie chart. And in both of these uh, visuals, we were able to talk about how we can use the data we collect to and use the graphs that we make to help tell this story. I think the students learned well this story of the ecology of Utah Lake as represented by these freshwater mollusks. And it's a story that's repeated in other communities in Utah Lake, and the fish communities and plant communities and birds and mollusks, of how the impact of humans in the last 150 plus years has really changed this ecosystem. We also had the opportunity to talk about the hope and potential for restoring some of this diversity in the freshwater mollusks. And we had Kate and Jordan come to class one day and talk about the importance of mollusks. And these are something that students and most of us probably would overlook most of the time, that these creatures are living in Utah Lake and around Utah Lake and going unseen, as you could tell in this story of the discovery of the Aplexa, which may have been in Utah Lake for decades, and yet no one had taken the time to observe and document that. As we talked about that with students, and many of them started to look for mollusks, and as we go back into the field, or even as they were out with their friends hiking, I had students sending me pictures of the shells that they had discovered, and I felt like this was a great opportunity for students to learn and really connect to Utah Lake and its ecology, and to think about some of the hard problems with ecology and the ecosystems where we live, and how we can preserve and restore and respect the biodiversity that's found there. I would really just like to finish by thanking Paula, Kate, and Jordan, also Professor Ben Abbott from BYU, who helped our students with taking some of the water quality measurements. That was part of their excursions, Friday excursions. And also the students at Wasatch High School for participating and getting excited about learning about mollusks of Utah Lake. And if you'd like to contact me, my email is here. And I hope that you have an enjoyable symposium.